3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk. Okay,
should be everybody's on board now.
We have liftoff. All right. Good morning, Wayne Allen Root, a famed libertarian writer and firebrand, and sometime candidate, I believe.
I was a candidate for president of the United States in 2008. I did win the Libertarian vice presidential nominee. I ran with Bob Barr, four-term Republican congressman. I was the VP nominee, and that was where my political career began. I was never in politics, basically. I certainly never any major national level until then, and came out of nowhere and won the VP nomination, became a regular on Fox News. Yeah. And since then I've done about somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 by my math, 7,000 to 8,000 interviews since then on national and local radio and TV.
Excellent. And of course you're also a contemporary of the famed Barry Soetoro at Columbia University.
I'm allegedly a contemporary. I mean, I always tell everybody that he was my college classmate. We both graduated class of 83 at Columbia, but people ought to be very worried about the fact that I knew everyone at the college and he wasn't there.
So in at least that mirror, there's no reflection of him.
I've never seen a single cent of Barack Obama, a single scene of Obama, any living proof that the man was at Columbia University. It's pretty scant. They claim there was one story in the campus newspaper written by him once in all his time there. So I suppose that's their proof he was there, but there's no human beings that could prove he was there. As a matter of fact, here's the thing. I've been saying this. We have a little fly bothering us. Good shot. I've been saying this for quite a few years. First of all, liberals love to call you a birther if you question anything about Obama's background. I've never questioned his birth. I don't know where he was born. I don't care. Yeah. But I've questioned why he wasn't seen at Columbia. So after all the years of saying why he wasn't at Columbia, I went to the class reunion, our 30th class reunion 2 years ago. Yeah. And I ran into Professor Henry Graff, the most famous professor and campus presidential historian in Columbia history. Knows everything about every human being that's ever been in politics that graduated Columbia, and of course every president in general. Yeah. And he said to me, I have serious doubts about Obama's story that he ever went to Columbia. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, can't find a single professor in political science or history who ever had him in a class. And you couldn't graduate Columbia political science or pre-law without being in my class, Henry Graff, and I've gone through all the records, and his name was never in one of my classes. So after all these years, I feel rather validated. Remember, he released his birth certificate. Lots of people still question whether it was real. I never gotten involved in that controversy.
I took a good hard look, and I had a couple of Photoshop experts take a look.
And they all felt it was a fraud, right?
The thing looks like it's been pieced together.
And that's what I always hear. But I've never gotten involved in the issue.
It's either a very, very bad scan, as in extremely improbably bad scan, or else it's a fraud.
Right, and I've heard that again and again, but I've never been involved in it. What I can say is I noticed the one thing he released was the birth certificate. He thought that quieted all the things about his past. He's never, ever come close to releasing his college records, ever. Nobody has ever seen his college records, and here's a guy who says he graduated with me at Columbia, and he's a ghost. He's the ghost of Columbia.
I have friends in IT at Harvard. They can't find his records either.
From Harvard Law School.
Because they're locked down so tight that if they exist, you can't get them.
But at least at Harvard, we know he went there because he was the head of the law review. So obviously he was there. My question is, what was he doing at Columbia when no one saw him? Where was he? Yeah. What was he doing? In his own book, by the way. His own autobiography. Yeah. Not biography, autobiography. Yeah. He said he spent most of his time at Socialist Party meetings at Cooper Union, which is downtown Manhattan. So I think it's interesting. I've said for years, this guy's a socialist, and here he is admitting in his own biography he went to Socialist Party meetings, and liberals debate you and call you crazy for calling him a socialist.
Well, have you noticed that lately the liberals no longer can draw a distinction between themselves and socialists?
Yeah, I have noticed.
Their leading candidate, not their inevitable nominee, but their leading candidate is an unavowed, self-declared socialist.
Yes.
And, by the way, he's an independent. He doesn't even belong, he officially doesn't belong on the Democrat ticket, but he's put himself there, and not he, not the head of the party, and not multiple senators who've been asked can define the difference between a liberal and a socialist. A Democrat and a socialist.
I saw when the question was posed to Debbie Wasserman Schultz that she could not tell the difference, or explain the difference. But here's the interesting part. So for 7 years, I've argued that every kid I ever went to Columbia with was, in fact, just like Bernie Sanders, proud to call themselves a socialist, a Marxist, a communist, or a Bolshevik. I heard that all the time, too.
Yeah.
Proud. And today we have not only Obama as president, a supposed Columbia guy, but his entire administration is riddled with Ivy Leaguers and Columbia grads. And interestingly enough, in the year 2007, you know what's significant about that year? It's the only year where you can match the voting record of Barack Obama to the avowed socialist Bernie Sanders. They both sat in the Senate together in 2007. Now, they did in 8-2, but he was running for president by 8. He was never there. He was absent all the time.
Yeah.
In the only year that Bernie Sanders, the socialist, was in the Senate with Barack Obama, the guy who claims he's a moderate and a uniter, not a divider, and would laugh at you for calling him a socialist, was the number 100 out of 1 through 100 senators voting record for the most liberal, which means he was more liberal to the left of Bernie Sanders, the socialist.
Of course, because Bernie Sanders actually has some common sense exceptions.
Like
he
actually
believes in
guns.
He believes in self-defense.
Yes.
Exactly so. So, anyway, enough about history and Barack Obama, of which there's plenty to talk, and the liberals go crazy. About yourself, sir, and what are you currently doing to advance the cause of liberty? What should people be looking for or reading that you're up to?
Well, I'm probably most proud of my books. I wrote one 3 years ago called The Ultimate Obama Survival Guide, and that was the number one political book in the United States of America when it came out, and it was in the top 5, 10 straight weeks. Finished the year one of the top 10 political books of the year. I'm a small businessman, and I'm a citizen politician. I'm not a big fancy academic or elitist or New York Times journalist. I don't work for Fox News. Nobody like me has ever, that I know of, had a top 10 best-selling political book. It's always someone who was a journalist for the New York Times or Newsweek or Time or the editor of New York. Very rare, so I'm very proud of that. Then last year I put out The Murder of the Middle Class, another book that 400 pages that tells you every fact of what Obama and his socialist cabal led by George Soros have done to this country, and how you're fed with lies by the media that the economy's okay and we're in recovery. It's all a big lie, covered up by EBT food stamps and welfare and the Fed printing money left and right, or you'd have tent cities and food lines. And that was a national bestseller. And now this year I came out with a book called The Power of Relentless. So when you ask what I do with my time, all day long I'm writing. All day long I'm writing commentaries that are read by millions of people at Fox News and Breitbart and Personal Liberty and The Blaze. That's my number one place, The Blaze, Glenn Beck's site. And I travel the country giving speeches. And I think I've woken up millions and millions of people. I'm very proud of what I do.
That's absolutely terrific. And as I've read a few of your pieces, I am ashamed to say, read your books, but I'll make sure I get at least one.
The Power of Relentless is the new one. It was the number one business book in the United States in the month of August, which is pretty cool.
It is, of course, on Amazon and all the other places.
And the best place to find me and everything I write about, by the way, is my website, root4america.com. I'm Wayne Root, so it's Root, R-O-O-T, 4america.com. How do you remember that? It's what I do all day. I root for America.
That's fabulous. What do you think of the current crop of outsider candidates? Not necessarily Trump, but some of the others that are at least purportedly outside of the Beltway politics. Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina, Ted Cruz, who's still not tainted, and a couple of others who are really trying to capitalize on the people's realization that it's a uni-party system these days.
I've always been a rebel and a contrarian and an out-of-the-box thinker. And sometimes I'm even a rebel and a contrarian and an out-of-the-box thinker with rebellious people and out-of-the-box people. So it's funny that you made that comment. What do you think of all the outsiders except for Trump? Because that's your hint that you don't really like him.
No.
I love Trump. I think he's great for the system. Here's why I like him. It's not because he's libertarian, because he's not. It's not because he's conservative, because I don't think he's a principled conservative. It's because he's Uber.
Yes.
Uber blew up the whole taxi industry. And if you're a taxi driver, I feel bad for you because you're dead. You may not know it, but you're walking dead. There's no reason for anyone to ever get in a cab ever again. Uber is fantastic, and they just annihilated you. As a matter of fact, if you're a cab driver, I don't feel bad for you, because if you're smart, you'll quit tomorrow and become an Uber driver.
And make more money.
And make much more money. So Uber is the greatest thing I've ever seen. It's so disruptive. Donald Trump is the most disruptive thing that's ever happened to politics.
Yeah.
If I had $1 billion, I would have been the Donald Trump of the 2008 or 2012 election.
Yeah.
But I'm not Donald Trump. I don't have his money, so I couldn't do that.
No.
But he reminds me of me, so I like him. I think it's good to be attack style. It's good to be aggressive. It's good to be combative. It's good to be on offense. Our side should always be on the attack and on the offense, not on the defensive, and Donald Trump does that. So I like his style, if not his principles always perfect. I like Rand Paul's principles, but I like the style of Donald Trump.
And there's a very interesting point. And no, I'm not totally anti-Trump. I'm actually coming around to the idea
There you go.
that the man is serious about doing the right thing for America,
Yes.
even if he has some flaws.
Agreed.
What worries me about Donald Trump isn't so much whether he's a principled conservative. I think he'll at least try to do the right thing. What worries me is he appears at least to be thin-skinned and inclined to simply go it alone. And we've already had one king in charge of the country, and we don't need another.
So let me give you a proof that he may be thin-skinned. I'm not going to argue what he is, but he does listen occasionally.
Yeah.
He's not just going alone, because one of the guys giving him constant advice is me, Wayne Allyn Root. And so Donald has a mutual friend of mine. We're great friends, me and this gentleman's good friends with Donald. And so he sent Donald months ago many of my commentaries. Yeah. And I started getting emails from the office of Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
And they would have an attachment. It would say, I'm Mr. Trump's assistant. He's got a note for you. And I would read the attachment, and it would say, Wayne, I loved your article. What a great column. Fantastic work. You're the greatest, Donald. And this went on for a few months, and I got quite a few of these. And I started sending him advice, and most of which I'm sure he ignored. But sometimes he'd send a note back and go, I love it. And then I'd hear him use it.
Yeah.
And finally, I said to him, you need to convince conservatives that you are a principled conservative. I want to write you a 13-point plan. And why 13? Because it represents the original 13 colonies. And I want to write you a 13-point plan that you stick to for the rest of the election. If you do that, you will win. And he sent back a note and said, can you write it in 24 hours? And I set aside a day and I wrote it. And I got it to him. And that was 2 months ago, and I never heard another word from him. So I thought he ignored it. Or I thought he didn't care. Or I thought he didn't like it. And he just threw it out. And then the phone rang literally, today is Saturday? This past Thursday, just 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. And it was Donald Trump's office. And they said, Donald loved your 13-point plan. His new book is coming out called How to Make America Great Again to pump up his campaign. This book's going to be the whole key to it. He wants your plan in his book, and he wants to give you credit and needs you to sign off on it. And we can't find it. It's gone. Can you send it to us again? So I sent it to him again. So it's now going to be part of his book. He listens. He remembered from 2 months ago that he liked it. He doesn't know what he did with it, but he remembers he liked it.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And that's a real Donald story, So
yeah, that's good. And the other reason why I think Donald's got a chance is, do you know his campaign manager?
I've spoken to him, but I don't know him like anything about his background.
Corey Lewandowski is a most excellent guy.
Good.
He was the New Hampshire organizer for Americans for Prosperity for several years, and then for the regional director for Americans for Prosperity. So he's got all the background of the Koch brothers and their striving for a freer and more prosperous America.
Right.
And so he took that with him to Trump's campaign, and you can see little bits of his advice in there.
Yes.
Do you know where he took something to heart that you said? When he signed the pledge,
yes.
Not only did I think he performed wonderful jiu-jitsu on the Republican Party, but he said what they don't. When he signed, he said, and I pledged my loyalty to the Republican Party and to the conservative principles for which it stands.
Right.
And I found that to be remarkable, not because it should be an amazing thing, but because the other people don't say it.
Right.
And he said it, and he basically put it in their face, I believe.
Right. Look, the big knock on Donald is that his ego's out of control, and I just laugh at that because you don't think every businessman has a big ego and every politician has a huge ego. You don't think every mayor and every town councilman of a small
city... You can't do that job if you don't.
Right.
It's impossible.
Exactly. Ego is part of politics, and you'd never be elected without ego. So, the argument is his ego's bigger than the rest. Well, that's why he's worth $10 billion. It's bigger than most businessmen because he makes more money than most businessmen. And I think that ego will allow him to get elected. I really do. I believe I believe Trump will be the nominee of the Republican Party, and every expert I speak to thinks he will never be the nominee. You know, all these guys I know who think they're so smart and they're they don't believe it. They think it's going to be Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio. Jeb Bush is at 4% in the polls. Jeb Bush is dead. They just don't get it yet.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, right now at this moment, if, and this is a big if, and I sent him a note about this, if he is serious and he puts like $250 million of his own money right now into a national TV ad campaign, he will bury them all. It's over.
He's polling well, not just in national polls, but in straw polls and gatherings like this.
But here's my point.
Everywhere.
He's polling well without spending $1 of money yet. His only money is an airplane flying around the country, and he gets free media. That's it.
Not only that, you know, I know conservatives who have typically stood with the equivalent of a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul,
who are going for Trump.
Me, yeah. And by the way, I was totally shocked. One of the regular representatives from the Nashua area, who has hosted Rick Perry at his house more than once, and Rick Perry's a good man, not 100% conservative, but a very, very good man. I'm personally fond of him.
He is a good man, I know.
And when Rick Perry dropped out, he put himself behind Walker, which was, you know,
another tragic mistake.
You know, and Walker, to my mind, was the conservative who might just have been acceptable to the establishment. Except I watched the establishment walk right past him. I know the establishment in this state, and they ignored him. I thought that's a bad sign. And then Walker turns himself into Pawlenty Mark II and flames out as Mr. Milquetoast.
Well, look, all my books make the same point. I am very principled conservative. I'm a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul in my views. But in my personality, I'm Donald Trump. And the Republican Party's been missing personality. And Scott Walker is a great guy, but he's got no personality. None. He's bland.
No, he hasn't. And I'm sorry to have to say this, his wife has negative personality.
Never met her, don't know anything about her. But
I met her a couple of times at a major Republican dinner where he was given a glowing introduction by the state grandfather, Papa Smurf Sununu. His wife managed to actually tick off most of the ladies at the event because she was just unresponsive, didn't twist that in a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
She really didn't engage.
Yeah.
She acted as if she didn't want to engage. I saw her again about a month or so later, just after his announcement. She was doing much better. They brought the kids. She mixed it up with the people.
She was learning.
She was learning. But she
having survived that whole union thing, though, you think she'd be a little bit more.
Well, but she may not have been part of it. I mean, she's the wife. I mean, the spouse.
But
her doesn't have to be political.
Her husband, every day, her husband is getting thousands of death threats. There's people storming his Capitol. I mean, my wife worries when I travel to events. You know, I mean, so as a wife, I'm thinking maybe she's used to it as a politician's wife. But that was pretty intense.
But without even knowing her, okay, it's like a doctor who diagnoses someone with cancer. It's never treated the patient. Without even knowing her, here's what I'll say to defend her. Because of what he went through and the stress and the death threats, she may have developed a subconscious hatred of politics.
Oh, yeah.
So when she went to the events, this was all something she didn't want.
National level.
So that's why I'm sure.
You mean we're going to do this in every state?
Right. You mean I have to go through a year of misery with
protesters
the death threats again?
And unions
so that
me
was probably her excuse.
Could be.
But what's his excuse when he went through it and he came through with flying colors? You'd think it would have made him into a battle-tested, combative, aggressive politician. But it didn't.
No, it didn't. And before we go too far down that rat hole, I ran into... there was one thing I was watching for from Walker. I never saw it. Only once is he ever recorded as having spoken out against the John Doe SWAT raids. And he didn't really speak out against them. He spoke out against Judge John Chisholm, who was persecuting him personally. And it got into a back and forth a couple of times. Nowhere did he stand up and say, you can't do that to my people and I'm going to come after you. He didn't say it during the investigation. He didn't say it when the investigation finished. He didn't say it on the campaign trail.
And these were his own supporters they were going after.
These were his own supporters.
I know.
The guy who took it to the liberals, who took it to the judicial system, was in fact the local man on the ground for the Club for Growth, Ed O'Keefe. He was the hero.
I've heard that name. Yeah,
he was the hero of Wisconsin over the John Doe raids, not Scott Walker. And I expected to see and hear Scott Walker stand up and say, damn it, this was an abomination, and we're taking steps to make sure it never happens again.
Right.
And he didn't say a thing.
The same way that, I don't know if you heard my speech last night, but my speech, I don't know if it was last night or it was maybe during the panel during the day, where I mentioned that Obama sicked the IRS. I mean, I went through 3 years of hell. And the result of that is it's an example of the corruption of government and the liberals who want no dissent and want to silence us. And it's a big issue for me because it happened to me. And I'm surprised that issue happened to him or his supporters, and he doesn't have an empathy for it and doesn't care and doesn't make it a big issue. I agree with you.
He needs a little Alinsky in him. He's not really,
Yeah, I've always argued that, you study your opponents and you pick up the best. Mm-hmm. And I think what I picked up from Obama is the power of relentless. That I did talk about in my speech last night. That the whole point of my book, Power of Relentless, is that we need to fight back with the same aggressiveness as they fight.
Yeah, never back down.
Obama lost in a landslide, got repudiated by the American people, and he's won every battle since. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. He never even lost a stride. We never even slowed him down. His response was, F you. I don't even recognize that any of you voted for me. You're not even real. He just ignored it. Some would say he's a maniac and a madman, but the end result is the American people don't seem to be angry about it. They don't even notice.
We have a constitution, and we have a majority in both houses of the Congress.
Right, and we achieved nothing.
And there are some Democrats out there who, in order to get elected at least, claim to be constitutionalists. And not one of those Democrats will lift a finger against Obama.
Well, who claims to be the constitutionalist? The president, Obama. He studied constitutional law. He's a constitutional lawyer. And I said from day one, the reason he studied the Constitution is to figure out a way to destroy it. That was what I predicted from the first day. His goal was to destroy it.
It's funny you should say that, because I was about to retort that essentially that was his opposition research.
Right. That's it. Well, so let's wrap it up. I've got to run. I got to play the game.
Like me reading the New York Times, for example. That's
right, and I do too, and I read it just to know what the enemy thinks. Exactly. Yes. I love reading liberals because it gives me all my ammo, So Obama read the Constitution just to shred it and destroy it. That was his whole goal in life. And by the way, I think he was raised from almost, not from birth maybe, but almost from birth, from a young boy. Whoever raised him, all the people that influenced him, all had the same idea in mind, to destroy America. That's what Obama's been genetically programmed to do, to destroy America.
Got one of your cards, Steve?
Somewhere. Okay. Don't know where.
Steve's our editor and scheduler, but you can drop me a line. Okay. If you would like to talk to us one Saturday morning by phone.
Yeah, here, I'll just, you know what? I'll just give you my card.
Yeah, that'll work.
You give me your card.
Yeah.
I lose these things. I get 100 in an event. Who the hell knows who's who? But you take mine. Okay?
Thank you.
Now you know where to reach me.
That's a nice heavy card.
Yeah, heavy card. I do heavy cards.
Just use it to break in.
Hold on. I have extra copies, so you're each getting one so you can't forget.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
This has been a educational, entertaining talk. I was really glad I spotted you and brought you over. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for bringing me over.
All right, Wayne Allen Root. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
This will be online later. If you're not familiar with us, please take a bookmark for our website.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Got it.
All righty. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Rock.